Thank you so much, Renee, for joining me. As I told you, we're working on a class on media literacy that's going to go online, and I thought who better to ask about why we need media literacy in a digital age than the most prominent person in the field, which would be you. So let's just start with that. At a basic level, why should we care about this?
Got it. So reason number one is that media literacy is an expanded conceptualization of literacy. And so the reason why we care about literacy is literacy, as we define it, is the sharing of meaning through symbolic expression. So humans, basically the fundamental nature of being a human is to share meaning through symbols. So the concept of literacy has expanded over the last 3,000 years, and media literacy, digital literacy are simply expansions of this fundamentally deeply human process of learning to share meaning through symbols. And it's through the sharing of meaning through symbols that we gain social power, right? And we gain influence in the world. The Greeks helped us understand that when they invented the concept of rhetoric 3,000 years ago. And they understood that those who were good public speakers, who could use persuasion effectively, could change the world. And the same is true today. So media literacy is important because it gives us the ability to use tools skillfully to accomplish our social and political purposes. Another reason why media literacy is important, besides thinking of it as an expanded conceptualization of literacy, is to think of it in relation to mitigating some of the challenges, or even, shall we say, the risks associated with living in a media and digitally saturated society. So we take for granted a whole bunch of content risks that are just absolutely part of our living in contemporary culture, like content like pornography, like hate sites, content like extreme, gory, horrific violence, content that is racist or misogynistic. So content risks, different audiences are vulnerable to content risks in different ways, and media literacy helps us think about how to mitigate effects of content risks. But there's also conduct risks and contact risks as we engage in social relationships in online media. And so media and digital literacy mitigates some of the negative or problematic or challenging aspects of growing up and thriving in a digital age. And then the third reason why I would say media literacy is important, why it's kind of an essential life skill, it's the foundation of the new humanities, as it were, is that essentially we are sort of trying to figure out what kinds of future exist for us with these new communication tools. And we've watched over the last 3,000 years how, Marshall McLuhan said to us, we shape our tools and then our tools shape us. So we're in this important historic period where we are trying to figure out how society gets reorganized, how economies shift and change, how education happens in different ways in relation to these powerful new tools. And so digital and media literacy competencies are part of coming to grips with the set of cultural, political, economic, spiritual, moral changes that are kind of woven together in this media ecology kind of a shift.
So, one of my goals and one of the simpler goals I have for this course is to persuade people that A, that they need to be critical thinkers, and B, that it's not as big a chore as it may sound. Can you talk about critical thinking and how you approach it?
That's a great question. You know, of course, in the media literacy community, we've been arguing about what does the meaning of critical thinking, what does critical thinking mean in relation to media texts, tools, and technologies for about 50 years. And there's a bunch of different schools of thought about what critical means. To me, I think there are a couple of important points that I like to emphasize. People hear the word critical and they think it means criticize. And so we have to disabuse people of that idea that to be critical is to criticize. In fact, being critical is essentially to ask questions about what you watch, see, and read. So the foundational concept in critical thinking is inquiry, asking questions about media messages. And actually learning how to ask questions and how to use questioning in your process of interpretation is a big life skill of media literacy. Another thing we like to emphasize in the media literacy community is the idea that critical thinking has to be based on what we sometimes call strong sense critical thinking. That we have to learn to critically analyze even those messages that we agree with. Because our general tendency is to accept without question the messages that reinforce or validate or extend our own existing belief system, and to apply our sharp critical thinking skills to the messages that trouble us, or the messages we disagree with, or the messages we find problematic or offensive. Strong sense critical thinking asks us to apply those good critical questioning skills to the messages that we agree with, just as much as the messages we find challenging or problematic.
So if we're going to, I know you have many ways of looking at this and teaching it. Is there any single thing you think is most important in being media literate in today's world? Any one thing that we simply start with? I say it start by being skeptical of everything, but not equally skeptical.
Well, as you know, Dan, I'm a big fan of those 5 critical questions. I think we have to ask who's the author and what's the purpose of this message, who's the target audience, what techniques were used to attract and hold your attention, how might different people interpret this message differently than me, what lifestyles and values and points of view are represented, and what is left out. I think those 5 questions are fundamentally, they tap into the big ideas about the relationship between authors and audiences, how messages have meaning, and how meaning and messages, how messages are constructed and reinterpreted through audiences and readers and writers, and then the big complicated question of how do we decide what to believe in? What's the relationship between the representation and the reality? Because the reason why communication has the power to change the world is that symbols stand for things. And we can actually rely on symbols as some kind of meaningful indicator for things that really exist. Right. And our ability to discriminate between accurate, reliable symbols and stupid bullshit symbols is a big part of being an effective participant in contemporary society. So those big ideas form the core of what I think of as critical thinking about media messages.
How are we doing as a society on understanding?
Depends on how you measure it, right? Doesn't it? Isn't it true in everything? Depends on how you measure it. You know, Joe Kahn has a really nice study of California high schools, and he finds that about, depending on how you measure it, a third of California kids get some slender introduction to both critically analyzing messages and making messages during their high school years. Maybe that's a sign of progress. But the other metrics might make you feel more dour, right? In terms of the American public's media choices, for example. We might wonder if viewers of Honey Boo Boo are all that media literate or not. But again, those are very indirect measures. How are we doing? It depends on what measures you use. I tend to look at the glass half full, of course, taking a little bit of a long view around how it is that people would acquire these skills in the first place. Dan, how come the media industry isn't helping people to be media literate? Because if they decided to take that on in a heartbeat, we could do it in 5 years, couldn't we?
Well, don't get me started on that. I think it's one of journalism's most squandered opportunities of all time.
Yeah, I agree. And I remember going to the newspaper and education people in the 90s and to ABC and to the Discovery Channel and really sort of explaining, look, you're going to get to produce the high quality, beautiful, good stuff you want if you invest deeply in helping people acquire these competencies for being able to discriminate between good stuff and junk. But for whatever reason, the media industry, well, there's been some great players. Adobe, God help them, the Youth Voices Initiative, a great example of good corporate citizenship. And we can think of other good corporate citizens in media companies who've stepped up to the plate in terms of media literacy. But because the media industry hasn't in large embraced this idea, it means that the only way we can introduce the public to media literacy is through the education system in K-12 or in higher education, or through the informal learning sector. Mm-hmm. Right? Through the internet and through social media and through after-school programs. Those approaches are a more bottom-up strategy, and especially since we haven't had policymakers offer us a lot of, financial support, those bottom-up strategies are working in a lot of communities. It's just a question of scaling it up.
Yep. So I don't want to keep you too long. I have a couple of quick practical questions. Whose work should people follow right now in the practical side of being media literate? What would be, apart from yourself, of course, who would be some people that, and again, they're not studying it as a academic exercise, but as a practical stuff for real life. That's my thrust in this course. Well, who should they follow?
Not so much about teaching media literacy as much as just being media literate.
That's right. It's about being media literate.
Wow. That is a really great question because there's so many different resources on that. I'm a big fan of Romanesco for like pulling back the curtain on the journalism business. But who am I relying on to sort of pull back the curtain? Oh, I love the guy, the Forbes writer. What's his name? I just worship him. The Forbes writer who's so amazing. Anthony Wing Costner, mm-hmm. who's doing the great columns online for Forbes magazine. He's amazing. I learned so much from him. Who else is doing media literacy in a popular area? Of course, you. Right, and I think who else in the who are speaking kind of to popular audiences about this stuff? There's a lot. That's a really great point, Dan, because there really is kind of a gap. We have scholarly discourses of media literacy, and we have sort of industry discourses mm-hmm. about media literacy. But in terms of the reaching out to the public, what's that? I just saw him in there. Hold on, this is terrible. I'm ruining your recording because I'm now going to go search online.
Makes sense to me.
I like David Weinberger's work a whole lot, and I think he speaks to a popular audience really beautifully. So those, I guess, are three good examples.
Okay, that's a great start. And certainly I will put them on the list of assigned reading for what we're doing. And let me ask you one final question. If, and again, this is from the be media literate standpoint, how much of being literate in this arena means, how much does being a media creator mean to being media literate in this new age?
Well, it's just like the concept of literacy itself, right? So it's important to think of literacy as being both a reader and a writer. There are things you learn by making media that really deepen your critical analysis skills and give you appreciation for the artistry and the artifice of playing with language, image, sounds, multimedia. So most of the scholarship in the media literacy community says that media production activities are an essential component of media literacy. But we have been aware that when media production is decontextualized from critical analysis or from reflection or exploration of ethical and social and political issues. When media production is simply turned into a set of cookbook how-to exercises, then those skills don't stand alone to support media literacy. It's a combination. We say you have to reflect on your own media use behavior and your choices as a technology user. You have to practice those skills of deconstruction and analysis. You have to create messages yourself using a variety of tools and technologies. You have to reflect on the consequences of media and technology culture. And then you have to take action in the world and try to put into practice through your work or your family or your leisure life steps that move us toward making those competencies of media literacy to be contributing to a democratic citizenship. Mm-hmm. So all 5 of those action steps, I think, constitute the holistic approach to media literacy.
Okay. This is wonderful. Renee Hobbs, thank you so much for joining me. This is a pleasure, as always, to chat, and I'll see you somewhere on our crazy circuit that we all have.
I enjoyed talking with you, Dan. Bye-bye.
Take care. Bye.